always tried to be myself. Always thought that it might help. Don't be feeling sorry for me now. I've already covered that myself. No heart knows common sense. No heart knows common sense. Can I have one last dance with you?
And you just forget that Dirt is a strange name for a person, but it's what sums him up.
I'm still yet to find a drum kit that can hold a personality like Dirt behind.
How do you rate Dirt's drumming in the early days?
You can answer that.
There was, when he was the drummer for the Sanity Assassins, dressed in leopard skin and bug eyes, and he fell off his stool when he in the middle of a song.
The standard thing is, you know, grunge, pop, whatever they call it.
Agit pop.
Agit pop, that'll do it. It's a bit of a cliche, but...
Yeah.
I just think, you know, let's just break it down. I think the best description I ever heard actually was bloody pop music with distortion pedals, I think, or something similar to that.
When he was wearing a leopard skin leotard thingy, which basically it was like the Darkness, only back then, and it was perfect.
He's always had that little element of campness to it as well, I guess.
What we kind of liked about all of Dirt's bands was that they stood out from what a lot of other people were doing. I mean that in a good way too.
I mean, he's like that, to his credit, you know. He can dig deep when he needs to, and that's always been his best quality.
I thought he was a Christ-like figure.
A Christ-like, oh, definitely a Christ-like figure. Yeah, the long hair, the thongs.
Yeah,
certainly.
Become very, very, very dear friends with my darling, wonderfully at times tragic friend, who's always been the life of every party he's at.
He also sang Sexuality by Billy Bragg in a faux Cockney accent, which contrasted quite strangely to the faux American accent that he usually uses.
I thought he was the genuine item, and that's really, you know, that's the blood and guts of it.
And you can feel it on stage. And if I didn't get that feeling when I was playing with Posse, then I wouldn't be doing it.
He's a showman and he's an actor. He's got a lot of presence.
You need a little bit of insanity streak in your frontman. That sort of.
Certainly one of the most shocking nights for me was the night where he sacked the band on stage.
You know, no matter, you talk of the Minnesota Triplets, Sanity Assassins, his personality was a draw card.
I think there's that thing in, I suppose, in any city, that you run into certain musicians who you feel they're like special musicians. They're like guys that eventually you'd like to work with. So, no, it's been a real pleasure to work with Dirt.
The Sanity Assassins, we were all at Griffith Uni, or the core of us were at Griffith Uni in '85, and Gary Marr was wandering around. He was in a lot of my classes, sort of early friend, and he was wandering around singing indie songs that I liked, and we just got to talking and sort of said we should form a band.
We needed a drummer, and I said, well, I used to go to school with this guy that had a humongous drum kit. I don't know if he could play it, but he had about 14 toms, Peter Criss style from Kiss, and I said I'd give him a ring, and I did.
Dirt obviously finished school before I did, was in a band, not sure if they called themselves the Sanity Assassins, but Dirt was drumming at the time, and around the time I finished school they needed a guitarist.
All that
those stage names, and I think that's when Dirt adopted his moniker, Dirt Petty.
The Graffiti and Casbah gigs, well, that's a story in itself. I cannot even begin to think about the number of drugs people took in those days. The Casbah was just a famous venue in a university where basically people would get together and play gigs every now and then, Sanity Assassins included, and we would just bring everybody that we knew into the venue and play gigs, but there was always somebody who had something to sell, which was mainly how the bands were paid.
But off the stage, he was probably the most gregarious of the guys in the band, and certainly, yeah, it was always good having him with a chat. And I suppose we used to all get pretty out of it back in those days, either booze or drugs or both.
Put it this way, we didn't put much focus on actually playing. It was more on drinking and getting out of it, and that's about it. I think they were fairly horrendous gigs, in fact.
Drunken debauchery.
Lots of equipment failure.
Lots of equipment failure, yes.
Sandy Punch was a free beverage that we supplied at the Casbah gigs at Griffith University, and they involved natural herbal substances, juices, alcohol, powder, all sorts of things, and people would just come along and dip into the rubbish bin full of it that we had there, and after they'd had two of them, for some reason, we seemed to be the best band in the world. And as a consequence, it was a very important part of the early days of the Sanity Assassins, because really, whilst we were energetic crap.
We all got on well, but there was some tensions over, songwriting, different people's abilities. Some people wanted to be more serious than others, so inevitably it led to problems.
Looking back, we were all trying to be so serious about, we wanted to be good musicians, we wanted to be in a good band. And when Robbie joined, Robbie was the best musician we had in that group. And being the bass player, he had difficulty with Dirt's time was a little average at that stage on the drums. So we had a chat and we sort of told Dirt he had a couple of months to shape up or ship out.
That was it. Robbie basically, put the ultimatum out. It was basically Dirt or him.
Well, Dirt as a drummer, probably it could be described best by saying Dirt was the best frontman I've ever seen behind a drum kit.
Dirt's always been a showman, so his drumming was similarly moulded in that it was always very much about show, less about substance, shall we say.
But to me, they were really taking away, I hope I'm not upsetting anyone, but I think they were taking something away from the band, because he was like, to me, the biggest personality.
Well, as I say, the best one he did with Sanities was when I saw him when we played with Psychotic Turnbuckles at the Outpost. That was his best gig behind the drums, and he was pretty spot on that night. Surprised us all. must have been sober for a change.
Yeah.
Thing to take note of here is that Dirt was, I don't think Dirt was ever destined to be a drummer. I don't think he was ever destined to be at the back of the stage. He was always destined to be a frontman, and that was basically what he was. He was a frontman behind the drum kit. He was never happy there. You know, not enough limelight back there.
Anyway, so we duly went through those couple of months, and Dirt worked extremely hard. Came back in, played the stay in the band audition sort of thing, and we were wrapped. You know, he'd really come on in leaps and bounds. He was a much, much better drummer from having put the concentration in. And we said, yeah, no worries, Dirt, that's great, thanks mate, we'll just move along and keep going. And he said, go fuck yourselves, and went off and formed Dirt and the Rebels.
I really believe the Brisbane scene was all the better for it, because you basically had someone with a very large personality that was in front of their own band, and it worked really well.
I was very impressed with Down the Rebels. Brisbane in the 80s was a place which was dominated by a number of styles of music in different eras. Initially in the early 80s there was a lot of new wave, and then there was a lot of sort of English style music or English influenced music, so you had a lot of sort of 60s jingle jangle sort of bands, you had mod bands, you had sort of R&B type bands. Everything was English dominated by and large style, and I didn't like that. I liked sort of American music.
Songwriting, like James and Dirt were great songwriters together. It was like that classic combination of music and lyric coming together.
The choice of music was unusual at the time. You know, Elvis covers, you know, Tom Petty.
And while there were obvious references and influences, there wasn't a particularly retro sort of feel about it.
I mean, you get popular by people knowing your songs and being able to play them proficiently and interestingly. And I think there's a lot of bands that can do that, but not a lot of bands have Dirt as their PR person.
Whoever it was that was booking the Outpost at the time sort of paired us up a bit, you know. We just seemed to work well together, so they kept pairing us up, you know.
1987, is that when we first played with Dirt?
Well, that's
That's what I thought it'd be earlier than that.
Yeah, and
As Dirt and the Rebels during that period.
Yeah.
They were producing very good music, and they were a very enjoyable band to see live, and they had a touch of class about them, which a lot of Brisbane bands around that time didn't really, I don't know, they not many bands were doing that sort of American sound, I suppose, particularly the Southern American sound.
The interesting thing about Dirt and the Rebels was, it was a rock band, but they were country influenced. They were one of the few that sort of had that country influence, country rock or swamp rock or whatever you want to call it, influence, and they were novel for that.
Some of y'all live down Sacramento. Some of y'all live down Sacramento. Down there we got a place that grows down the woods and the fields. Everybody calls them cold salad. Cold salad. Used to know a girl lived down there. And in the evening she'd go out in the woods and the fields. She didn't take herself a message. She carried on, she couldn't the silver. Cause that's about all they had. But they did alright.
He was such a showman on and off the stage. He had a huge following of people that it didn't matter. They came to see him. They just came to see him perform on the stage. Because when he came off the stage, he was very generous with his time to his followers.
He initially envisioned an extravaganza, and I think the first few Dead the Rebel gigs were him, musicians behind him, backup singers doing dances and hand claps. It was a whole production number. All you needed was, you know, elephants dancing on pedestals, yeah.
Dirt was strong on publicity. He was out there asking everyone if they knew who he was. And you know, if the reality check came back that they didn't know who he was, he told them who he was.
You know, and also he had the goods too. I thought vocally he was good, you know. So he never had a problem with that, with his confidence, and it was a draw card.
In the early days, in the 80s, Dirt, before he got the massive ego, I think he really cared about what the audience thought, and he really worked hard to make sure everyone had a good time.
Yeah.
And people knew the songs, even the originals. People knew every word to every original. That was what used to amaze me about the crowd that came to see them. They would sing it, every song, the originals word for word, which proves how long they came to see them.
I was studying music at the time at uni, and I had a hire piano there that used to just get totally trashed come 3, 4 in the morning when everyone was getting home from the clubs. But honestly, there was some pure magic, you know, that Dirt was able to conjure for us in those times.
There was like the famous night of the closing of the Outpost, I guess, that last night at the Outpost where both of our different bands had played. And it was kind of like him and me with our foot in the door at the end, not letting him shut it, sort of thing.
There was a lot of travelling. I mean, we played up the coast a couple of times, you know.
Played down the coast.
Played down the coast, you know, Ipswich.
Playroom.
A lot of travelling.
The Caloundra gigs were good. We did the surf club up at Caloundra. That was fabulous because it was just a bunch of surfy bums, you know, looking at us going, you know, who the fuck are you? And we've come up and we've popped out Lee Revick and Peace Dog and you know, Red, White and Blue and all of that sort of thing. And we've won them over. And by the end of the gig, you know, we've got the crowd and Dirt's got them in the palm of his hands by the end of the gig.
It was a good gig too. It was a happening gig, that particular gig. I mean, it was really firing, you know. And I thought, wow, this is great. And of course, that was one of those occasions where we had to follow us. No wonder we drank so much back in those days.
Yeah, the number of pain.
That sort of freshness amongst us where we knew we just like could concentrate on like getting a song or two recorded, and we had like a renewed energy, and after that it was unknown, yes, but we definitely wanted to record those couple of songs that became a single.
James was much more tasteful and tasty. His wah-wah work in particular on Send Back My Heart's just lovely. And we had, on Sad State, we had Id on piano, which just was beautiful.
Sad State of Affairs was a great ballad, and I think it was written by Dirt in relation to some emotional crisis I suppose he had. But the song actually fit, and when I listen to the song it always reminds me of Dirt at that time in his life. And I liked the track. It was a ballad, and it was a sort of just a ballad, but as ballads go, it was pretty good.
You've got to be a certain sort of person to pull off a ballad, which is like, again, I mean this in the best way possible, sort of slightly miserable and narcissistic, and Dirt nailed it.
Great recordings and captured a lot of what Dirt and the Rebels was about at the time, I think. We were very strong, well-rehearsed, good chemistry band by that stage.
Well, Send Back My Heart and Sad State of Affairs, which at the time were the heavy and the soft of what we were doing, were kind of a good... They stand out, obviously, because we recorded them, and it's a good way to bookend what we were at the time.
Because when we shared a practice room with them, we all became very close friends and did a lot of drinking.
I remember it was me and Ed, and with Dirt, we would basically just stay there on a Friday night. We couldn't be bothered to pay to get back home wherever we lived, and we'd stay in the YKK building, get completely pissed and stoned out of our brains.
Basically, Richard Triggs wasn't in the band when I came back from overseas. In fact, neither was the rest of the band except Dirt.
I wasn't really musically interested. It wasn't a musical challenge to be playing with Dirt or, exciting for me musically. Although, I was quite happy with the sets that we did put together, and I think some of it was quite good.
But basically I came back in on bass, and so it was Dirt, Cameron Earl on drums, Stuart DeLacy on guitar, and Ed on keyboards.
Loose, drunken, slightly sleazy, very Dirt.
We got a bit more psychedelic, basically.
I remember he drank a bottle and a half, as that was at the Actually. He drank a bottle and a half of scotch. He was very messy. We were slightly messy, not as messy as Dirt. We did a great version of Dirt, the song Dirt by the Stooges.
He just took these chugs, and they were 15-20 second chugs where he's just going,
Opening strike.
oh, and letting it go.
The new Rebels gig that I played bass where Dirt couldn't get anything to work and fell drunkenly off the drum riser into the keyboards at the end of the gig and then sacked the entire band. It was pretty memorable. I've got that on video somewhere. That's quite awesome.
You made it out you should want to be free. Yeah. Hey, he's so chewing on the camera.
But my understanding was that Stuart and Cameron and I were only ever playing in Dirt and the Rebels to fill in for a little while, and it was, just for a bit of fun, which we did. And then when that came to an end, we pretty much quit. But the night of the final gig, Dirt got very, very wrecked. And as you've probably seen on the video that will be spliced in here somewhere, that he was lying on the floor screaming that we were all sacked. Whereas the truth was we'd already left.
But this is the last gig anyhow, so it was just Dirt, Dirt being Dirt, creating another myth, myths are all good, yeah.
Classic Dirt the Rebels lineup got back together after there'd been some other Dirt the Rebels. And we did the last hurrah at the Orient, I think it was at the Orient, with the five Hanks supporting us.
The most fun band to play in was Dirt and the Rebels, because although we didn't have much cred as a whatever band, because our drummer had a double kick drum and our bass player wore spandex tights and all of that stuff, we got the most gigs and we played to the most audiences, and some of them liked us.
It was a large attendance, it was upstairs in the big room. Yeah, it was a great night. It was really good. It was like a certain celebration, yeah. And we all had a great time. It was a feeling of celebration.
There's sort of an upstairs, downstairs. They had to open the downstairs bar because people couldn't get served. More than 800 punters.
Don't you know the time will tell? I've had enough of this bullshit of my blues game. It's tearing me apart and I got no one to blame. Sometimes I wish I would go to, sometimes I wish I'd lie. Sometimes the truth doesn't work out, sometimes.
We had a great career, supporting some great bands around the place, and had a good few years, sort of intermittent breaks here and there, and yeah, we laid down a couple of good tracks. So we just had the impetus to sort of take us to that point where we'd sort of pretty much done all that Dirt and the Rebels could do, I think.
I remember it as being great, good fun, you know. To me, always playing was fun. You know, I always enjoyed myself. I still do. But, the memories of that, yeah, the old Actually Hotel, the watch house down there. It was a den and a half, that place.
Dirt had surrounded himself with musicians who were, as a group of musicians, were more proficient than I think than anyone else had been. No offence to any of his other musicians, but as a group they were all very, very tight band. And, you know, the story goes, or legend goes, they sort of saw him somewhere and thought he was, 40 years old and a grizzled old drunken blues hound. Little did they know that he was like 26. He was drunken, but he was 26. He'd come sing with us, and
I think the easy answer to that, mate, is just a character issue.
Yeah,
some people
voice too.
Well, yeah, but some people you just don't gel with, and so therefore, it doesn't germinate into anything. So I think that's all there was really.
He was a good bloke. He was a fun fella.
And he had a unique way about him, and both on and off stage, and that's important. And I think today, in a lot of ways, just listening back to a little bit of it then and having not heard it for many years, I'd say that in a way it was a little bit. It could have almost fashioned into something like John Spencer Blues Explosion, but we were actually playing at a time when there was when it was completely unfashionable.
Sorry, yeah, it was.
Blues is right on the nose. It was right, completely counter to the whole '80s push.
I've never been a really big blues fan, and I appreciate it for sure, but Croc and the Dials had that sort of swampy Texan type boogie, and they were great musicians.
Well, as I said, very harmonica player friendly, I should say. Yeah, no big ego. He was happy to share his stage with a harp player. Great grungy voice.
Croc and the Dials. I saw Croc and the Dials. Oh yeah. Well, look, that was pretty unrehearsed, it would seem, or not as rehearsed as other things Dirt's done, and quite jammy in feel. And Croc's a good harp player, and they were groovy nights. I really enjoyed Croc and the Dials. It was a lot of fun. Dirt did some material that was a little tricky for him, and he did some material that really suited him. And he had good players all around him, and they were nice nights. They were nights that had chemistry, and that's all you can ask for out of a band.
Can you remember rehearsal like that?
No, I can't remember rehearsals either. No, no. As Dirt said, there's one song there, we said, here, give him a tape, you had to go to the car park and write the words out so he'd up and sing it. You know? And he did a good job. He did a great job. He wouldn't have known that if we hadn't said it, you know, listening to the tape.
You really got to react to that personally. You've got to say, is this person here coming at this in a genuine way, or is this person, you know, trying to pull a put? And, you know, Dirt always fell on the right side there, you know, where you felt as though whatever he was going to do, you could sit behind. See, fundamentally, you're on a drum kit, right? You've got your own job to worry about, but you also got to be feeling good about what's going on in front of you and what you're listening to and the energy and all that shit. So, you know, he used to provide all that. He used to do it well. So, you know, I concur with Croc on his participation.
It leaned very much to that sort of electric blues boogie, which I don't always get into, but they put on a great show and they were so tight. But again, I think they were wrong place, wrong time. If they were doing that maybe 5-10 years later, I think they would have had a bit more of a following.
It wasn't a cheap and nasty, I don't think in our mind, a cheap and nasty episode on the way to you know, to a cheap and nasty association with music. It was definitely in there as a little memory.
To me too, it was an outlet for me to play harp in every number. Like within Yellow Harry, I said to get off the stage here and there, and get back on, get off, get on.
Oh.
You know what I mean? With certain songs, the way the set was lit. This was a good little rock and blues outfit where I could play harp in every tune and have a great time doing it. And I have to wind myself up for a tune and want to keep going. I've got to get off the stage because some punchy little top 40 song was about to be played. You know, I was playing rock and blues the whole night, and I was in heaven.
He did, you know. I mean, he did. You couldn't shut him up, really.
You know, there's a limit to how many songs of other people you can do in one set, but we wanted to, you know, keep it fresh, so we learned more than just the couple of songs we were playing, and eventually we had a set's worth, I think, or very near to, with a few extra extended long versions of Diane and things. And yeah, so that's the Minnesota Triplets. We spun them off, however you want to call it. And,
I didn't know who they were before I met James. He was the one that turned me on to them, and I think similar might be said of Dirt. And we all got into it.
I must confess, at the time, I didn't get it. I didn't really understand quite why these guys were so in awe of Bob Mould.
I was like ignorant of the appeal that they had amongst underground punters.
I always thought the Minnesota Triplets were really interesting and about 5 years ahead of their time. I mean, they predate the whole Seattle thing, which is, you know, poor old Bob Mould was about 10 years ahead of his time.
anyway, it was always popular when we did that, so there was no big soul searching forming the Triplets. We thought there was a market, not a market, but we thought there was an audience for it, and yeah, we were right.
Dirt was particularly sort of liberated, like, because his position in the band was like just the front man. He didn't have to play guitar. Just going for the rawest, most energetic type of sound.
some really cool Minnesota Triplets gigs. Like one upstairs at the Orient where there were just so many people there. It was awesome. It was like really crowded and they loved us, and strangely enough they knew all the songs, being all Husker songs. It was quite good.
I remember getting a good bloody mouth at a gig one night. It was quite a dark gig and I was singing backing vocals on something and people were just jumping up and down in front of us. One of them hit the mic stand into my face. And, you spit blood out and hope that the teeth don't go with it, sort of thing. And it was that sort of night. It was just sensational. I loved playing with the Triplets.
Yes, perhaps they should have had a reformation in about 1995.
You know, obviously Tom Petty was a big influence, and that I think originally only stemmed from the fact that he looked like Tom Petty in his younger days.
Yeah.
Extremely so. And I think that's where it started. Then he actually started listening to Tom Petty's music and got into him that way. And of course became a rabid Tom Petty fan.
There's been different ones. He did a few different tribute bands as well, which were always a nice little sideline. You know, he had the sort of Tom Petty sort of tribute band. He had the Husker tribute band, the Minnesota Triplets. They were always fun to go out and see, just songs you knew, you know. People sort of went along, had a good time.
Like for Dirt and I, we had like the fresh input and like musicians with Gab, Ron and Dave, and it was great to hear like, you know, Tom Petty's songs come to life on the Brisbane live scene.
Yeah, it was good fun music. The music was lightening up a bit then. It wasn't so as hardcore as some of the stuff Dirt had been doing, and it was a bit more playful and we had a bit of fun.
They had the feel down quite well. It wasn't quite note for note, but having added the keys in and having a guitar player that could try and get Mike Campbell down fairly well, that was good fun.
So I came from sort of a very negative position with Southern accents, because it just wasn't my cup of tea. Having said that though, again, they were one of those bands that just, you couldn't help liking despite yourself, you know, because of the way they played and what they played and how they played it. And it was just good fun, which should be the epitaph of every decent band.
Delighted the quality that we performed with, and I could tell that we sort of had, even though it was quite a while ago now, that we had put in the hours in the rehearsal room to like make it all come off at quite a high quality level.
I think if it had been a cover band of anyone else, it probably wouldn't have worked. But yeah, being a Tom Petty cover band, and obviously Dirt back then had a remarkable similarity to Tom Petty.
Most of Dirt's bands have had a certain stage presence. That when you're actually there, it's been quite a lot of fun. I don't think that's been the case whether you knew him or not, because there's certainly bands like Minnesota Triplets and Southern Accents drew very large crowds.
I know there was a couple of gigs at St Paul's Tavern go. There was always a few good nights there where he'd have some, you know, guests getting up and playing with the band, guest vocalists, guest guitarists and things.
I remember particularly one gig at St Paul's Tavern, which was great. I remember it for a few reasons. Having a ball with Dirt. We actually had a ball rehearsing and getting some of the songs together, and including a couple of duets. Me trying to do a Stevie Nicks impersonation. And that was that was a really fun memory, actually singing with Dirt. Not ooh-ahing, you know, in the background, doing backing vocals, or going to see him, which I love, but actually sharing a song with him. I have lovely, very, very fond memories of that. And also wearing one of the most hideous tasseled suede vests you'll ever see.
In those days, he was a legendary persona around Brisbane.
He had a good reputation around Brisbane. I never heard anyone say anything bad about Dirt in Brisbane. I mean, he's a guy with integrity and yeah, and credibility.
What can you say? Dirt Petty, brother of Tom, basically nailed it in one.
He had the look. He had, you know, Tom's, all his like idiosyncrasies. Like he was very well studied. He very well studied Tom Petty, and his like his voice, his delivery, and his gait, and what he does. And it was like it's a great sort of depiction of like a real professional at work, fulfilling the role. And yeah, so I think Dirt did a great job.
Dirt had put out a solo cassette called Never Forget, and it's kind of soft. We did some full band recordings in there, but from what I recall, it was mostly acoustic guitars and things like that, and you know, piano sounds on the keyboards. And
look, I remember having a ball because I was sharing a house with Gary at the time, and Dirt and Gary had been such dear friends for a long time, and so there was a really close-knit circle of friends, and so it wasn't going to work and putting music down, it was actually just going to hang out with Dirt and have a party, and we made some great music together, and his songs were great, and it was really easy for us to ooh-ah over the back, and yeah, had a ball. It was really, really fun stuff.
Dirt got some gigs, sort of, I guess, on the back of that, and so obviously we wanted to play those songs. And they were songs that we could just play as an acoustic duo, which is how Dirt and I started out. And from there, I don't think we're ever more than a three-piece, although I could be wrong. Yeah, we kept playing those songs, and I guess out of that grew the Hideous Debacle.
I think there were times Dirt and I talked about putting stuff on. We used to, whenever we'd see each other, we've got to do a gig, and then I can't remember how they came together.
The excitement of not knowing what's going to happen, and it's going to turn into a debacle. So that's one thing that you can be assured of, and no one really cares, because the audience don't really give a flying fuck. You know, they're more wasted than you are. So.
See, there was a thing that used to happen for me, like I'd be put off having to go on after Dirt if we happened to play after Dirt, and so, you know, I just found it easier to just turn up after they'd finished playing.
Look, honestly, for me, with whatever lineup Dirt was doing, it was just always about Dirt, you know, he's just the showman, and I went along mainly for that reason, and was never disappointed because he just always put on such a good show.
Dirt came back from where he was having his break. We wanted to make music again. Wanted to write songs, and of course from that you have to recruit a band. And Barb performed from there. I think September '93 or thereabouts was our showcase gig at the Pineapple Hotel, if I remember correctly. So
I think as a band, when Barb were on song, they were probably among the best live bands in Brisbane. The problem that I think we had was that we weren't on song often enough.
There were some great songs in there. I think it's unfortunate that they're a band that was operating outside of any fashion of the time, so nobody could really get a handle on what they were doing. And
I see Barb as a transition band. That was sort of like, you know, you've got Dirt's earlier bands, then his sort of more or less his solo stuff, and Barb sort of sit there. And I must admit, I don't know whether it was Mark's influence or what, but Barb didn't really do it for me.
It was a pretty sort of a poppy, catchy, infectious sort of band. They had some good catchy songs, some sort of downhearted sort of slow stuff, bit of rock, bit of pop, you know, had a bit of everything.
Yeah.
So that was probably the peak for me so far. Anyway, who knows what's coming?
Again, completely unique, and I played quite a bit in various other bands around Brisbane, particularly, and never really came across anybody else whose song structure sounded that similar. Yeah.
Dirt had raised himself to another level as a front person. He'd gotten through the messier part of his life where he was a bit messed up and a bit drunk. He got through all of that and become a very hard-nosed, experienced professional player. And it really showed with Barb. Barb were very, very strong. They just got out there and nailed it to the wall.
me, I like putting a few minor chords in there, and Dirt's lyrics are always slightly sad, slightly something going wrong with Dirt's songs, and it just seemed to go down together well. But
I've played with a lot of musicians, and James isn't in the top 5 as far as technical ability goes, but he's certainly in the top 5 as far as creativity and smarts, you know, music smarts. He's got a good brain.
I mean, Dirt applied a lot of the fine tunings with the actual melody, where the melody wanted to go, with the harmonies. James initially, primarily, most of the stuff that we did originally written with James, would have all the hooks. You know, he'd come down with the actual basic structure of the song, and then the two of them would present it to Steph and myself.
You know, the songs are kind of fairly cleverly constructed, and they're not run-of-the-mill, not necessarily completely predictable. You know, although there's a lot of 16-bar verses and 12-bar choruses, they're not necessarily completely predictable. But when you tap underneath that, I think a really strong kind of post-punk thing holding it down, then it worked really well when we got it right.
But I always looked upon James as kind of the musical authority in Dirt's musical enterprises. James had sort of come up with ideas. James is the one that was always had an ear out for new stuff.
Like James' work in there. He played good guitar on it. Yeah. I like his playing though, you know. I thought he's a great guitar player, you know.
the later ones stand out as time went on. I quite also liked More Is Less, which was slightly earlier, but again, it was just one of those that was in our style as much as our style was kind of trying to sound like Husker meets Tom Petty meets whatever. Chip Away and More Is Less were the sort of the successful, the Dirt Hens successful ones that kind of epitomised what we were trying to do with those sorts of things.
Myself, I think they loaned me out to Spank, who didn't have a bass player. And I think we had one rehearsal. Just in true style.
You're talking about people who just lived and breathed dirty rock and roll, and we're up there doing a song called Dirt by the Stooges. Dirt was dirt. Dirt was nice and cabaret and very campy in it, but still singing it with passion. There's real passion.
Very good. But on the musical side, I remember him singing a duet with Wendy from Love's a Blur, doing Dirt upstairs at the site. I've been Dirt and I don't care, and it really went off, of course.
Steph got his hands on through his access at the uni, CD Audio Plus, which was brand new technology in the world, and that ended up being the killer to us.
I mean, today you can buy a CD burner for $29 down the road, right? Back then they were $9,000. A blank CD was $170. You know, I went through about 40 of them trying to make this thing work.
One of the things that gave us the edge was the fact that we were able to market this interactive CD Plus technology, which absolutely no one else had. Long story short, Festival got to the point they were that interested in using it as a marketing edge, they came up, of course, to watch us play. They were keen to sign. It was all to be done. All we had to do was deliver the product.
And I found somebody in California who said they would press it for me. We only wanted 500 copies or whatever. So I bundled up a copy of the master and sent it off to California. And what transpired was that those guys really were just blowing wind up my ass, and they sent it on to Sony's major replication plant.
Sony got hold of it. They had Prince, I think it was at that stage, was on the verge of releasing his audio CD plus CD. Sony decided that they'd pull a little stunt. They held it, and like you saw, I've got all the paperwork there, dropped off earlier today. They decided they didn't want some nobody band from nowhere called Barb being the first in the world with this technology. So they just refused to press it, and they refused to return the disc.
And I started making phone calls into America and getting up at, setting the alarm clock, getting up at 2 in the morning so I could ring Indiana. Talking to guys at Indiana, and they're saying to me, the engineers are saying to me, well, it's fine, it fits the CD enhanced specification, but we haven't released that spec yet, so how did you do it? You know. And it went all the way up the chain, and I actually ended up on the phone at 3 in the morning to the Vice President of Sony America in New York, demanding that he press our CD. And he simply said to me, well, we're not going to, and you can sue me if you want to, but you know what American litigation's like.
So that was a killer. I mean, the amount of money we poured down the tube trying to get that disc back, trying to get it released with solicitors' fees, the invoices are there, and all that, and just the stress it put on the whole band. That was really the death of the band, to be honest.
You know, I mean, the reality was we felt like we were about to go somewhere, and then all of a sudden we weren't, because we'd been screwed over by the world's biggest music corporation.
That was basically it. Sony got wind of it, Sony got their hands on it, Sony killed it.
So my dad brought just to pay the rent, get some extra cash to get.
Hillsy had been playing with Dirt down maybe the Newmarket Hotel, where we'd previously done acoustic gigs as Feeding the Dogs.
It's all my band except the drummer with Dirt, but Dirt is such a wonderful encouragement.
And they played, and they were going to play the gig. It was actually after Barb had a gig, I don't know if it was their farewell gig, it was under Dirt's old house at Red Hill. And we were playing after it, and I just joined Sweet Mary. They asked me to join in and Marcus.
Mick, Dirt's flatmate for a year. Now I'm leaving. I've never told Dirt this before, and there's plenty of reasons why I'm leaving. One of the reasons I don't want to leave is because he's such a wonderful man. Fuck.
And then we were going to play, and we all set up, and then Hillsy was drunk as a skunk. He couldn't tune his guitar. He spent, God, it seemed like an eternity with Hillsy, not even able to stay on his seat. He was falling over, trying to tune the guitar. So my initial gig, my first gig with Sweet Mary, never actually happened due to that.
I don't know. I mean, you meet some people you just want to flick off. Other people, you find they're clinging to you. Other people, you want to cling to them. And sometimes you find a bit of clinging, and sometimes a bit of push, and sometimes a bit of both, you know. That's how I feel with Dirt, you know. And I think it's time for me just to fuck off. Otherwise, I'll never be straight enough and sober enough to do what I want to do. And he's so generous, you know.
In the city, everyone knew Dirt, and you know, you'd be walking along the street and these chicks would come up, do you know this Dirt Petty character, you know? And I'd go, well, yeah, you know. And they go, well, how do I get to know him? And you say, well, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy at all.
Dirt and I kind of came out about the same time, around 94, 95. Because, you know, it's pretty tough coming to terms with being gay in quite a backward sort of state for most of the 80s, and where you could be thrown in jail, etc. So it took a little while to sort of, you know, to come out, especially since we'd kind of been socialised into the band scene.
And Dirt's absolutely brilliant. He was also at our fundraiser, and Dirt's going to sing a couple of songs here for you today. So please welcome Dirt.
But I started writing as a news writer for Queensland Pride newspaper, and was involved in the Pride Festival to some degree. So I was able to get Dirt a spot playing at the rally, and managed to write a couple of songs for him about it, or write the lyrics and the melody at least.
Well, you like synchronized swimming and athletics. Well, I like the football. Oh, Ian Roberts had a big crush on him. You said it was funny, peculiar and strange. Like a boy like me and like rough and tumble game. Don't call me peculiar, don't call me strange, don't call me a pervert, just call me mate.
All I can say is there was a lot of disappointed women, and we were lucky enough to just hang around and, you know, try and scoop up the leftovers. We did our best, but you know, they only had eyes for Dirt.
Sure,
so,
sure. It opened up, you know, took the pressure off us a little.
Yeah.
You know, in selfish on us thinking that at first.
We sort of, I think we followed it up with a Masquerade Park gig that was a completely different sort of vibe. It's out the door, it's like festival in the park, and that was particularly sort of more enjoyable because I think we had like a couple more rehearsals and.
It was a fun gig to play. Just because it was a fun gig to play. We hadn't played together for quite a while beforehand. We'd obviously got together and, you know, to record Brick's Secret, but hadn't played, but obviously recording it, wet our whistle for it.
I enjoyed it a lot because like it was getting together with Dirt and James again, and I hadn't played with Batsy, Mark Batten or Breen before, and I knew that they were really solid sort of performance with Dirt over the previous few years.
But I do remember children and cops and lesbians and all sorts of people dancing around in front of the stage, and I think it went down pretty well. Yeah, no, it went down pretty well. I remember even, you know, in the beer tent people were getting off on it, and that was good.
Yeah.
I think it certainly went down better than playing a couple of acoustic songs at the rally end of the fair as he'd done a few years earlier.
I mean, it was interesting recording because we weren't really performing as a band at the time, and so it was a matter of Dirt going, we got some recording time in a couple of months.
Yeah, and Dirt did well, you know, it's the best thing to do at that stage is like use the talents from the pool that, you know, that are, you know, inspirited to do it. Yeah.
This cultural clash, if you like, of having these screaming, distorted guitars and people like Dirt and Batsy and stuff, and then they'd walk out of the studio and in would walk these, you know, string ensemble or something.
Yeah. I haven't. Oh, I don't listen to a whole lot of music, but for a while when I was listening to that, I kind of was quite impressed by some of the things that they did with it. I don't know how. I mean, you know, he got a nice arrangement for strings put to some of the tracks, which I thought was very, very good.
Like, finally the big time, not scrounge, digital studio, you know, practicing the songs to go in and record them and get them down, and yeah, it was cool.
And having just slagged Barb, who should have been a better band because they played together for so long, the different musicians actually, I think, contributed to what makes Brick's Secret sound so good. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on there. There's also a uniformity, which is actually Dirt's voice, which is probably the best it's ever been in the recorded form. And some really nice melodies, some really good tunes that benefit from good playing.
I think Cerebral Hemisphere is as good as anything Silverchest.
I think just the musicianship by that time, yeah. I mean, obviously everyone starts out in bands and you get, well, you hope you get better and better as each band goes along. You start to sort of tend to play with better musicians and you get better yourself. Like Dirt's got better at playing guitar, got better at singing, better at songwriting.
And the whole band, they seemed like focused on, they seemed to know what they wanted and just went for it. And you know, I was really impressed by that. And it came out like that on the disc.
Yeah. Well, I love the final product. I think it's his best thing to date, and there's a couple of corker songs on it.
Constant. Dirt's themes are always pretty much tied up with his past and his background. I mean, you know, there's a lot of songs about redemption, and there's a lot of Catholic guilt in there, whether he acknowledges it or not.
At that stage, I thought Dirt should sell his songs. Definitely sell his songs to songwriters, not songwriters, to musicians, to get some recognition for things that he couldn't do, which is sing, which don't ever tell him that, but he's at the outside.
I'm sure I'll never find out.
No, at that stage I thought the songs are brilliant, and he should just sell his music and he'd make a fortune.
And stay true to himself and his need to express himself are the strongest part of his game, no doubt.
One of the other sessions that we're in the middle of, and suddenly basically Cooge and I think Tony, and I'm not sure who else from the Hanks, turn up and they record a song with Dirt.
I think I was actually living up at Woodford by then, so Martin and I had come back to the Big Smoke for a party specifically to see Young Dirt, and we weren't disappointed. It was an awesome night. We came in, we were running late, and he was already on stage, and I could have been just a little bit drunk. Arrived, because I do remember screaming out obscenities, and Dirt and I having a little bit of dialogue from stage, and I remember dancing and partying like so much. I just danced my butt off that night. The music was so good.
Yeah, as a blinder, as a beauty.
Good fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Best recollection of it is the encore, where Dirt joined us for a few tunes, and it was a cracker. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that was sensational.
Fun. That was fun.
It was great to see him up there again. I haven't seen him before.
It was a big crowd. Yeah, well, he was right actually.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and he hadn't lost any of his showmanship.
Still hasn't.
And they were tight. They were so tight.
It was good, and it was great because the Five Hanks were there too. And whenever Dirt and the Five Hanks are sort of on a bill together, there's a certain amount of magic dust that's sprinkled. They work well off each other. It was and it's definitely beer drinking music, and I did that.
The people who were there were people I hadn't seen for a long time. It was a really lovely reunion of the Brisbane band scene that I'd known from 10 years before. So that was really nice too. We'd all got a little bit older and a bit crustier, but we were all there. And yeah, great music. And again, like I mentioned before, those two bands, having Dirt, a total Brisbane legend, and having the Hanks, in my eyes, a total Brisbane legend as well, on the same bill. It was just sensational. It was a really fond memory, and I do remember that one. I must have only been drunk.
Yeah, we did tune off Brick's Secret as well. Also, maybe you played the Skins on that one, yeah?
God, did I?
Yeah, sure did. Yeah, no, that's a good one. That was a beauty. A lot of people there. Daughter was born 2 days before it. Good time for me.
Hey!
What impressed me the most was up to that stage, up to that time, music again was largely English and dominated and so on, and everyone was doing sort of Who covers or Beatles covers or Stones covers or whatever. And up come the Hanks, and they do like 6 Elvis songs, and I said, I'm just, Elvis is gone, this is just fantastic. Of course they didn't finish a song because the lead singer was drunk, but that said, that impressed me so much, we just had to see him again, and we wrote Dirt in eventually, and we all just became mammoth Five Hanks fans. It's a pity they never recorded.
I always loved the Five Hanks. I mean, probably the greatest live band that ever graced a stage in Brisbane.
We'd certainly done a lot of gigs with the Five Hanks over time. They were our favourite band that we loved to play with, and they loved us playing with them, so that worked really well.
Some nights, you know, with the wrong band, the whole night wouldn't gel, you know, but it always used to work. It just used to work good with the two of us, so that's why I guess we'd get booked together. I mean, we never used to really book bands ourselves, or we were put in that position by people who are promoting, and they just must have recognised us as complimenting each other, I guess. You know?
When I had to pick up a time out or time off or whatever the hell it's called for however long, but there always used to be all these bands. It's like, who the hell are they? Who the hell are they? At least if you were playing with the Five Hanks, you knew who they were. You knew you were playing with a damn good band.
Yeah, so we always loved the Hanks. We had a great sort of repertoire with the Hanks. I mean, repertoire. They had the great repertoire.
Yeah, it was just generally good fun, and yeah, having Dirt up there was great. And we did that If I Can Dream, the Elvis classic
king.
And Dirt and I sang that together, and it was great fun. And, fighting the mic off each other, it was fun.
They sort of neatly bookended what the Five Hanks were doing. The two bands went together really well, and again, there was no one else in Brisbane really doing that sort of stuff. And nationally, I guess the only other band that would sort of come close to that was the Johnnies, but they were a bit more cartoonish.
You know, there's nothing worse than watching a support band going, you know, looking at each other and going, what are we going to do, guys? You know, and go out and do your same old set and hope Christ it works afterwards.
Not only that, as it was, I'd lose my voice after 3 songs, so I'd have to scream over Dirt's bloody racket. You know?
Yeah.
I always think about when you're looking at histories of Brisbane music scene, after you get over your Chris Baileys and then go-betweens, for me it was kind of the Hanks and Dirt. That was kind of the next set of legendary landmark music in this town, and a lot flourished afterwards. But they were two bands that established a really strong alternate scene at the time and kept on for a long time.
Perfect compatible sort of bands, because they could do separate sets which sort of complemented each other in a way. And then of course, if the mood was right, then Dirt and Cooge would get on stage. And as showmen, I mean, Cooge is very much a showman as, you know, as Dirt. So when you have two of them on stage, it's, you know, it's worth the money.
Be My Cuckoo, one of my favourite tunes. A strange song that I've always seen it as having a male and a female imagery in it. Strange enough, did the female imagery in that?
Oh,
of overtures towards country music in the past, with especially with Dirt and the Rebels and Southern accents, they were still all sort of rock bands with sort of country, sort of like undertones. Whereas here, this was more or less a straight country band with maybe rock overtones. So,
but when it came to pulling off that set, we did well, and the crowd enjoyed it. And these are songs that they're not your country songs that everyone's going to hear. You're trying to put on songs that they haven't heard before.
Yeah, we end up doing the songs the way Posse wants to do them, which is a bit different, and that makes it sound better.
Sort of, I think, appeal to Dirt because it's fairly, good sing-along music, I suppose, and beer drinking music, and he does both of those fairly well. So it's easy for him to sort of make the quantum leap to that.
And Dirt has not lost any of his charisma. If anything, now that he's not a superstar anymore, or at least a superstar in his own mind, he really gets back to business and really works the crowd, and he really was giving the crowd 100%.
And it's a completely different scenario for Dirt. It was a scenario he'd never been in before, to the best of my knowledge. This is a guy, and I was really very similar, who's used to doing shows in local pubs or whatever, and there's a $5 cover charge, people pay money to come in, and you play your stuff. And either like it and get pissed and jump about, or they don't like it and they don't come next week.
And the feedback was great. But that first set really was. Probably the high point of Posse so far. Posse hasn't done a huge number of shows today, but that's the one that stands out in my mind.
Oh, okay.
I have to say the Posse set was tight and professional. The Elvis set was very entertaining. It was perhaps a little bit loose due to the fact that they only practiced the sets a couple of times, but the crowd went off, they loved it.
And we went there at 5 o'clock and set up, and the punters are already on the piss. I'm thinking, this might serve us well. This might serve us very well.
No, he really had the crowd going. They absolutely loved him, and he was Elvis. He just submerged himself into
becoming
Elvis. Yeah, becoming Elvis.
We obviously are not Elvis impersonators or whatever, but in Kingaroy, they'd been on the sauce since 5 o'clock. And we didn't go until 9. They were loving it.
A couple of girls at the front were mucking around or something and having a bit of fun, and they bumped his microphone stand or something, and the mic hit him in the teeth. That was about second song or something, so he was instantly offside. He was not a happy camper.
And he did very well, and he sang with a few of them, and then I think a drink got spilled or something happened, and the crowd kept coming up, and then there was problems with a few of the songs that we didn't play well, and got hung out to dry vocally.
The performance had gone really well. It was the first set of Elvis, but he had to come back for a second set of Elvis. So off he went. We had a special green room for Elvis green room. So Elvis made his way to the green room. He went in, patted his face or whatever he does, adjusted the Elvis wig, and he was cool. He was chilling out, but nobody came to see him.
We didn't actually know where Elvis had gone to, and Elvis thought the band had left him in the lurch and wasn't going to come out dressed in gear. We sort of went, where is he?
I can't remember what flared up. I remember what we were accused of. We were just accused of completely dumping him and leaving the poor bugger on his own.
You've hung me out to dry. I'm the singer of this band, and I'm leading this, and I'm doing it, and you don't even care where I am. How the fuck are we meant to do this? And you were sitting out here drinking beers, and you left me out to dry, just sitting there, you didn't care.
By the time he came out, he was fuming and, you bastards, and he was ready to do his, the whole band sacked. He was ready to do the band sacked routine.
In all my time as a thing, I've never had anyone come onto the stage and it was like this. They pay to come in and see me, and they don't get up on the stage. They're security, and he's wigging out.
And I said to him, look, mate, I went to see you straight afterwards and couldn't get in. The door was jammed or something. Anyway, he backed down and he sort of felt like a bit stupid by overreacting to the whole thing. We went back upstage and the rest of the night went fantastic.
Alright, this is your chance.
Also squeezed in somewhere in there a short Neil Diamond tribute set too, and Dirt just lapped that up as well. The good thing about Dirt is he's very flexible, and he can just put himself in a certain role or a certain mode and create a certain persona, and he just goes for it. So as far as the crowd were concerned, he was Elvis for 2 hours or so.
Yeah.
He was Neil Diamond for half an hour. He was the posse lead singer. I mean, he could sell each of those personas to the audience, and they just lapped it up. They were jumping on the stage. They wanted to be with Dirt. They wanted to be with the band, and Dirt was practically having to kick them off the stage. So it was a good show.
He walked on at Kingaroy like he was walking on at the Orient, in front of 100 people who'd been coming to see his bands for the last 3 months, and you know. And it wasn't like that. It was a bunch of pissed people that we didn't know that were mates with the client. And if they want us to play Sweet Caroline 7 times, then we fucking will have to. You know? Otherwise, we're either going to get beat up or we're not going to see the money.
I don't think Brisbane was really ready for Posse Mark 1. So we're stripping the chassis down. We're going to give it a fresh lick of paint, and we're going to rebadge the new Posse.
But at least he was exploring a different area, and it's an area I would have liked to have seen him go into a lot earlier, because you know, he's part ham, and I think that suits, you know, for a boy from Brisbane to play country sort of music from, you know, the US South and Midwest. I think you need a person like Dirt to do it.
But the amount of effort and skill that goes into his songwriting is impressive. And I really enjoy the process of working with him to develop those songs further. I mean, it's hard to believe the guy was ever a drummer, because, you know, drummers are not supposed to be musicians.
And Sad State was really the first decent, mature, smart, private outpouring that he created.
Times when he did Poke Celadani once or twice, just incredible. Yeah. Certainly a lot.
It was very much his backup band. So I mean, it's always been Dirt and the whatever. So let him go, let him do his Elvis moves, let him sing Poke Celadani. It's not a problem. Poke Celadani's a fun song to play anyway.
Oh, there's no peer. Dirt has no peer when it comes to being a frontman, because one thing about the way Dirt does things is Dirt does not compromise on who he is.
I know he used to bung on his American accent a lot, but you know, it was quirky, but it was appropriate. It actually was very appropriate, because it brought people into this. It brought people into what he was trying to do, and I think it worked. You know, it did work.
Same issue. You could sit behind him and play, and you felt like someone's actually holding that space up. They're giving enough back to the audience. And I think that's. I mean, he was a twigger. In other words, he used to bung on in those days. He'd bung on that little pseudo American tinge to the voice, you know, but it was almost comedic, right? In that there was this sort of Las Vegas presentation underpinning this thing, and but it fitted the entertainment mould. So it used to come across as being genuine. It was his way, and it, you know,
kept the punters entertained.
Yeah, you know, and people responded accordingly. So you know, it's all part of the formula.
It was sort of a bit of a breath, particularly when it started, because it was very much that scene was suffering from the fact that a lot of bands sounded the same. There wasn't a lot of difference, and you know, that coupled with Dirt being a showman out the front, giving the petty calls and stuff like that.
Southern accent.
Yeah, the southern accent, and you know, I think it all coupled together to just give a whole show that was worth seeing. It was worth paying for.
I think Dirt really enjoyed it too. Elvis is one of those things that I think anyone who gets out on a stage in a way is emulating Elvis, and getting out and just projecting their personality and enjoying the show. And most people would secretly love a chance to dress up and try doing it like Elvis, even if they never actually do it. And I don't think the opportunity was wasted on Dirt.
Oh, look, I haven't worked with anyone as good as Dirt, I don't think. And especially, I think he modelled himself on a couple of the world's best, you know. There's the influence of Elvis and Tom Petty, and vocally, like, he could really sort of spit out the bile that Bob Mould was capable of.
We all know Dirt's a big Tom Petty fan, and Bob Mould and all that. But he's moulded it, pardon the pun, he's moulded it into his own thing. I'd rate him very highly. I'd rate him higher if he had more hair.
Unreal, absolutely, the best I've played with, without a doubt. Just, you know, he just lives for being on stage. You know?
Yeah, he does.
Everything else, sort of, you know,
becomes this convoluted little, existence that happens when he's not on stage.
Yeah, twisted and mangled.
He's okay vocally. I think what the more with Dirt is that he puts it all in the efforts, and he's got the moves and the shimmies, as he likes to call them. And he's not only the frontman when we're playing, he's basically the frontman of the band. He organises us to get to practice. He does all the ringing around. In that sense of the word, it's Dirt's band in that sense of the word, because we just turn up and play. So there's that part of the frontman of the band. But when he's on stage, it's that commitment that he really puts into it. And then there's the Jekyll and Hyde part of Dirt.
You can't start playing music with somebody like that, with that kind of strong personality, and not expect there to be, I think, conflicts, the odd bit of weirdness. But at the end of the day, hopefully what shakes out of that is a whole bunch of interesting and original music.
He's got a certain arrogance when he gets on stage that either appeals or annoys people. Generally speaking, though, I think he tends to go down pretty well as a front man.
Very entertaining and always getting better.
Pure, unadulterated showbiz. Hammer superstar. That's what I reckon.
He was the ultimate showman, really. He could hold a crowd really well, and they loved him for it. He was also fairly badly behaved on occasions, and we were the ones that picked him up and carted him off and took him home.
He's what everyone wants to be, I mean, I can prove that I'm telling the truth there, because right at this present moment, we actually have a band called Dirt Music Club. So all roads lead to Dirt.
It does.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, very flamboyant. I mean, like I say, like the whole thing about the band, it was always good fun. Having said that, you never quite knew whether they were going to totally stuff up or actually pull a rabbit out of their ass. And either way, the results are always enjoyable.
Dirt's greatest forte is being the actor. He never should have been a musician, he should have been an actor. He's narcissistic, he is great at imitating, and he's great at putting on a show. He really should have been an actor. I mean, at school he always was an actor. Obviously I've known him since school. I don't know if this interview is going to get into that, but yeah, I've known him since school, since grade 1. But yeah, he was always an actor, and I think, Dirt can play anyone. I've seen him do Tom Petty just perfectly. I've seen him do Elvis perfectly. And he looks nothing at all like Elvis, but he can do a spot-on great Elvis impersonation. Dirt, when he sets his mind to it, can just do anyone.
11 out of 10. None more black, that's it. yeah, you can't do better than that. Regardless, music aside, just Dirt on stage. He had has a charisma and a really special gift in his ability to be able to share his music with an audience, and it's great. It's really lovely to be a part of that, because not as many musicians can do that.
In one word, shit.
Thank you for your time.
Well read. I have no idea, man. The guy's a legend, without a doubt. But it's just it'd be a shame to see the legend end, here.
Narcissistic.
Cute.
Rock.
Bold.
Insecure.
Can't do it.
No one word exists that can sum him up.
He's a complex person. He's been a friend for a very long time, and I can't restrict myself to only one word about him.
Filthy.
Loyal.
And may it sound strange, but decent.
Insatiable.
Terrier.
Friend.
excites some people.
Bald.
Gee whiz.
Salubrious.
Nefarious.
Probably focused.
He's a highly complex person with some fantastic traits and really is a beautiful human being in almost every way that matters. And sometimes he drives you up the fucking wall, you know?
Enigma.
I just keep coming back to leopard print.
Oh, way too hard. Oh, legend. Has to be legend. Yeah, legendary. Wonderfully, tragically legendary. No legend. We'll stick with that.
Dirt in one word. Well, his name says it all.
Dirt.
Dirt. That's it. There's no other dirt. That's it.
See, that's the
He
thing,
just
like-
didn't remember anything.
Yeah, if we tell these stories about his embarrassing moments, he'll just deny them because he never remembers them. Most of them are at the point where he's beyond the point of any conscious thought.
Yeah.
Oh, I can remember one at the outpost where he was so inebriated in which he was unable to actually gain his feet.
He lost his feet.
Well, he couldn't stand up, is what I'm saying. And he ended up in the speaker stack, groaning.
The Pineapple Great Capo Debacle. It was Christmas Eve. It was the worst gig Barb ever did. So.
Why?
Oh, it was just horrendous. You know, it was like capo on this song. Can't find the fucking capo. James, where's the fucking capo? James goes, I hadn't fucking touched the capo. And it's a capo one, and it's so out of tune. It's just there's fucking no point. It's blank, blank, and Dirt has this really great idea that the capo one and this guitar is so out of tune, and no one's. It's incredible. It's like playing Chinese or something. But Dirt believes that if you hit it pluck staccato, that no one's going to notice. You know, which is really what. That's blink, 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 blink. It's still fucking so out of tune. It just doesn't matter.
Was he sober?
It was just, oh god, no.
No.
I've never played with Dirt sober in my life, Gary.
I do have recollections of certain gigs of Dirt's being performed in the rather novel position of the supine position. Geechee Tims can actually pull off singing lying down. I'm not so sure Dirt can.
There were all these diners down below on a busy night on a Friday, Saturday night. And we had a party which was themed to sex, so everybody was dressed in fetish gear or whatever. Dirt was in his Rod Stewart leopard skin jumpsuit and was splayed out across the glass ceiling, overlooking all these diners. And had to be pulled up by his feet. And you see these people looking up and seeing this Magna leopard skin jumpsuit and a little cap being pulled up. Oh, and I took his photo nude once.
I'm sure that would
which was used as a poster. I have the uncropped version.
The time we went into town, it was about 1987 or 88, and he was about the peak of his sort of local powers. Everyone more or less knew who he was within that scene, and we were walking through town, and everyone's slapping his back and saying, "Hey, Dirt, how's it going?" Blah blah blah. And he's going, "Yeah, mate." Don't know. Of course, doesn't know their names. "Yeah, mate, how's it going?" Blah blah blah. Dirt had a bogey hanging out his nose, down to his top lip, and he was slapping back, talking to people. People going, "Yeah, Dirt." And we did this for about an hour and a half. And I was with him this whole time. And
You never told him about the...
Well, he was being the rock star. Didn't want to encroach on his, on his fame. And about an hour and a half later, he sort of went, "Oh, geez, how long has that been there?" And I went, "About an hour and a half." He wasn't happy.
Well, this one isn't actually... took me a while to think of. There's so many of them, and as I said, he doesn't really get embarrassed anyway. But this one, I think it was a fairly classic one. It wasn't actually involving a gig as such of his, but it was at a gig at a Livid Festival, and I think they were getting ready to see Buffalo Tom play. Basically, they wanted to be primed for Buffalo Tom, and they had some eckies to go, and Dirt needed it to come on quick, so he decided he'd do the old sifter up the date, which Dirt is quite comfortable with anyway. And anyway, so he's in the middle of the Livid crowd, gets down on his sort of knees, on his haunches, and drops the strides, tries to stick the eckie up his date and loses it. Goes down the pant leg, can't find it, looking for it, can't find it. Oh, Jesus, got to get this. So it's down with the strides, on the ground, searching around, trying to find it. Gets it up off the ground, it's got dirt, pubes, bum fluff, God knows what on it. Sort of takes one look at it, hesitates for about a second. Meanwhile, there's like 1,000 people standing behind watching this whole thing.
No.
Just going, what's this guy going to do with this? Down the neck. Down the neck. Wash it down with a swill of warm beer. Up with the pants. Acknowledge the crowd. And probably enjoyed Buffalo Tom immensely. So, as I say, that probably wasn't that embarrassing to do, but I mean, it's a pretty ridiculous thing to happen.